Good afternoon and welcome to the Leadership Learning Webinar Series. This series provides monthly learning on relevant business topics like today's topic, resilience in the face of adversity. I am Natalie Crotto, Program Manager at Lake Forest Graduate School of Management. We at Lake Forest Graduate School of Management are proud to be hosting today's program. Lake Forest is an independent, accredited institution with over 50 years' experience at providing practical business leader education. This education comes in the form of graduate degrees, certificate programs, and targeted training and development through our Corporate Learning Solutions programs. Corporate Learning Solutions specializes in developing corporate managers and leaders by combining relevant content with the expertise of our business leader faculty to provide customized training, consultation, coaching, and organizational development services to our corporate clients. We are grateful for the sponsorship and generosity of our client and longtime supporter of the school, Trustmark and the Trustmark Foundation. Trustmark provides access to a full spectrum of flexible benefit solutions, including health plan administration for self-funded employer groups, payroll-deducted voluntary products, group medical benefits, and health and fitness management programs. We are able to bring this webinar to you on a complimentary basis as a result of Trustmark's support. I'd like to take a quick moment to go over how we will interact today. During the program, you will be invited to participate using polls, chat, and hand raising. If you have questions or comments during the program, please submit those through the chat feature on your right-hand side. If you chat a question or comment, please be sure to use the drop-down box and select all participants before submitting. Please be sure you are muted and that your video is off for the entire program. Now I'd like to introduce Mike Baskin, our facilitator for today's session. Mike Baskin teaches leadership courses at Lake Forest Graduate School of Management. He also teaches emotional intelligence courses for our corporate clients. His background includes leadership roles at many organizations and serving on boards of directors. His specialties include sales management, sales training, human resource management, onboarding, staffing, business development, and corporate culture and customer service. Mike is skilled as a motivator, seller, and team builder with a strong organizational structure and human capital focus. Mike, we're pleased to have you here today.
Thank you, Natalie. I believe I'm still showing up as Natalie, but this is really Mike, so we'll know that you can tell by the difference in voices. We start with a quote that's an interesting comment about the power of resilience. More than education, more than experience, more than training, a person's level of resilience will determine who succeeds and who fails. That's true in the cancer ward, it's true in the Olympics, and it's true in the boardroom. From Dean Becker. Resilience is in for many reasons. It's in for children. There's evidence all over the United States. There's actually a resilience program at Penn that works on developing cognitive, behavioral, and social emotional skills for students using role plays and games. Resilience is in because of the subject of grit, which many of us have heard about and was made famous in the book Grit, The Power and Passion of Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. Resilience is referenced and thought about for disaster preparedness by FEMA. In a book by Stephen Flynn called The Edge of Disaster, he wrote an interesting statement. America needs to make building national resiliency from within as important to public policy imperative is confronting dangers from without. In other words, his point is that communities must find a resiliency gene from within. And it's clearly in for business. It comes up all the time in all of our worlds, those of us on this call. I was thinking about this while I was preparing for our conversation, and I think it's because resilience takes place at the personal level. And as a result, every one of us, everyone on this call, is called upon to be resilient at some point. When facing a setback, when facing a loss, when facing a wound, self-inflicted or otherwise. But all of us are required and are called upon to exercise resilience. So I think it makes sense that it's in and talked about so frequently. So let's go ahead and let's look at this together. And we're going to do, with this model, we're going to look inward first, and then we'll look outward into the intellectual model of resilience and how we can exercise it. And I don't use exercise casually. The cool thing about resilience is it's like a muscle, and muscles strengthen with exercise. Resilience, like a muscle, can be developed, it can be increased, it can be made stronger with practice. So it's something that all of us can improve. We're not just born with it, or not. In order to think through how we talk to each other, or at least how I talk to you, I'm going to ask you to focus on a coaching idea. And the coaching idea is focus on your true. So let me distinguish between true and truth. True, which is what I'll ask us to start with, is who you think you are. And true is how you think the world works. So examples, a true statement for one person is, I believe hard work will get me where I want to go. A true statement for another person might be, it's all about who you know. The point of this is these truths are based on history, personal beliefs, behaviors, experiences. And that's what drives our behavior, and that's what drives our tendency towards resilience or not. That's why I ask that we start that way. We will move from true to truth. And truth in the coaching model is that which exists regardless of my belief system or any consensus. So by way of example, a statement of truth would be the world is round, or I looked this up, a statement of truth is the Earth's diameter at the equator is 7,917.5 miles. So if you get nothing else from our time together, you now know the Earth's diameter at the equator. We'll start with focus on true, as in true north. And once again, it's because our behavioral patterns and our responses, such as resilience, find their source in what we think and believe is true. And then we'll move from true to truth when we discuss what we're going to call the three elements of resilience. So I'd like to ask a question of you. And the first question is, would you be described by a close friend as resilient? And we'll ask you yes, sometimes, or no. So let's give you a few minutes to, or a minute at least, to respond. And the real Natalie is doing this now.
Yes, I'm here. Looks like answers are flying in.
We are now in the world of true, what we believe to be, because it's hard to prove.
Like yes is winning at this point.
That's a good thing.
Give it a few more seconds.
So we'll close in just a moment.
All right, it's analyzing the results, and we should have an answer in a few seconds.
This is cool. You have a pretty dominant answer. So, when asked, would you be described by a close friend as resilient, almost 50%, 49% to be truthful, 49% responded yes. A quarter of you, or 24% to be precise, responded sometimes, and very few responded no, only 1%. And then some of us are still thinking about it. So the answer, it's interesting. So yes and sometimes were 3/4 of the responses. So let's dig a little deeper and ask you a second question. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being extremely important and 1 being not even relevant, how important is this, what you think of as resilience in your work? We're working from raw data. I'm on purpose not even giving you a definition of resilience yet. So let's see what you say.
Okay, and the poll has been opened. Answers are flying in. Thank you for responding.
I'm very curious about this because businesses believe that resilience is very important. It's interesting to note is at our individual contributor level in our environments whether we perceive resilience as important. So that's what we'll learn from you.
All right, we'll give it a few more seconds. People are still answering.
Oh, and once again, it's quite a quite clear answer, at least as a group, as a consensus.
All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. Let it do its analyzing, and we'll have an answer.
We're going to come up to ask you a specific question about definitions as soon as we close the poll. But first I wanted what we call raw data in the trade, where people are starting from.
All right, so here are the results.
So what we see, interesting, what we see is that almost exactly the same numbers for D and E. 38% of you said that resilience is important at work, and 36% of you said extremely important at work. So if I can still do my math, that's 74% of the population that we just asked felt that resilience was either important or extremely important in their contribution and success at work. Very interesting. So we're talking together with a group of people who see themselves as resilient and see it as important to be resilient for their work product and their work contribution. So let me ask you a question, and I'm going to ask you to chat this in to Natalie. What do you define as resilience? What is your definition? Let's see what people have to say.
And please chat into all participants so that others can see your answers as well.
And we'll tell you what you said.
All right, Mike. So failing and not quitting is our first answer. Being able to bounce back, inner strength, capability, the answers are flying in. Being collaborative, flexible, the ability to bounce back from setbacks, strength through challenging times, recovering quickly, persistence, roll with it, being able to realize that you can get through anything, staying positive, persistence, knowing you're still okay, staying strong, bouncing back when things are tough, strategies, bouncing back after pulling out of the pit of despair, strength through change, like a rubber band, like that one, not taking all things personal, persistence, still thinking you can do it, unexpected shocks to life, adaptability, staying strong, reminding self.
You're coming in fast enough so that it's like a ticker tape.
They're flying through the screen.
Embracing change. Resilience is being able to respond to challenges repeatedly, without fail, through fatigue. Presence of mind.
Good answer.
This is great. Stable through bumps in the road. Notice, there's a funny one. Notice that there's a theme to all of these, and even if you hear what you've said, it's motivating. It has to do with this idea of continuing to move forward, not being pushed down, being able to bounce back, being able to persevere. All of those words were brought up. And you know, so I wanted to look at the definition from the dictionary. It's always fun to know the origin of words, and some of you said exactly this. So notice from Webster, it's the ability of something to return to its original shape after it has been pulled, stretched, pressed, or deformed, or compressed in some way. And notice also, for those of us who have Italian in our wonderful blood, it comes from the word salire, and salire means to go up, to leap, as you go upstairs, for example. So it has to do with this idea of restoration to the original place after someone is bumped somehow or interfered with or harmed. So all of the things you said are part of resilience. Absolutely fabulous. Okay, let's talk about resilient models. So now we're going to move from our inner world to a world of models, and let's see what we discover and what's useful to us together. So the first, I'm going to offer 3 elements of resilience in these slides. And my understanding is you're going to get the slides afterwards, but if you take notes, it might be useful to you. So the first of the 3 elements, see reality, and notice the sub-comment, which is very important, in a way that is actionable. This is from an HBR article, How Resilience Work in 2002, from Diane Coutu. And what I want to emphasize in this first idea is actionable. The important idea is to see things as they really are, truth in our prior conversation, but make it so in a way that's actionable. Second, we're going to come back to this, but second, find meaning in what occurred. One person commented, maybe many, that not take things personally is part of resilience, and here it is. The event that occurs didn't happen to you, it happened. And so it's up to you or us to give meaning to that event that inspires you to purpose or action. I'd like to read you a couple of comments that really highlight this. A man named Viktor Frankl was a trained psychiatrist who was interned in a concentration camp during World War II. He developed a concept, and you may have read his concept. It was in a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And his point was that he survived the most horrific circumstances because he found meaning in the circumstance. He found the idea that if he can survive what he was enduring, one day he would be able to talk to people about it and help them understand what was learned from this event. He quotes in his book, and I'm going to read you a couple of quotes, a famous quote from Nietzsche, and the quote is, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. Meaning is why. How is how am I going to get through this? I want to read you another comment that he made. He's an extraordinary man. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. The purpose of number 2 in these 3 elements is to give back to us the choice of our response to go forward from whatever has occurred and take action. Okay, let's look at a third element of resilience. Continuously improvise. Now, from this, I'd like to build on it using an Army concept. There's so much to learn from armies, and this happens to be from the Israeli Army. In the Israeli Army, soldiers are divided, or at least talked about in 2 ways. One, it's in Hebrew, is Rosh Gadol, and Rosh Gadol's literal translation is big head. It doesn't mean what we say in English, meaning conceited or something like that. What it means is seeing the whole view, seeing the whole landscape of what's occurring, such that I can improvise and act upon all of it. They distinguish between Rosh Gadol and Rosh Katan, which in Hebrew means little head. And that is, instead of seeing the whole picture, seeing only what's in front of me and narrowing my scope to just the narrowest interpretation of that which I've been asked to do. So the third idea behind resilience is this ability to continuously improvise and to see the whole picture, Rosh Gadol. notice something. It builds on element number 1, which is see in reality in such a way as you can take action. That's what number 3 reinforces. Once again, I like quotes. I'm going to read you a quote from President Franklin Roosevelt that expresses this. He said, it's important when facing something, pardon me, let me start again. It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something. Continuously improvise, take action. This isn't easy, and I'll give you an academic reason for this. John Gottman at the University of Washington identified a phenomenon called flooding. Flooding is when emotions flood our systems due to anxiety or fear or panic, which can often occur in very challenging moments and situations. And that event, flooding, displaces the ability to think. It even displaces peripheral vision. Peripheral vision, when one is calm, is approximately 150 degrees. I can see 150 degrees around me. When I become very focused, fight or flight, peripheral vision narrows to 30 degrees because all I can focus on is the direct threat that I've identified. So I want to say this is not easy to do, and the ability to keep seeing the whole panorama is part of what we're going to look at next and how we can do it. Okay, so let's apply these principles. Remember, they were see reality in a way that is actionable, find meaning that gets you through to the end game, and continuously improvise using Rosh Gadol, excuse me, your big head. There's a boo-boo there. So I'd like you to look at 2 pictures, and let's take a show of hands on this. And what I'm going to ask you is which elements of these 3 elements apply to the person or story that this picture represents. So let's start with a picture of Nelson Mandela. And I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and pick the most operative, in your opinion, of the 3 elements when you think of the story of Nelson Mandela. So first, please raise your hand if you see as the most operative for him, see reality in a way that is actionable. I'm forcing you to make a choice, a forced choice. And we'll give you just a moment to respond.
You should have a hand raised on the toolbar under the Participants tab. See some people raising their hand?
Tell me what the count is, Natalie.
Sure, we'll give it a second. There's a few people. Looks like we have about 20 people that have raised their hand.
Okay, so 20 people find see reality as the most operative. How many people find the second idea of resilience or element, find meaning that gets you through, as the most operative in the story of Nelson Mandela?
Looks like there's about 60 so far. 77, raising quickly. 83.
So it looks like that's, we already have over half.
98. Yeah, we're
98. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'll say third, although we already know by process of elimination, continually improvise using the Army idea of Rosh Gadol. I'm sorry, it's misprinted there.
Let's see if we get any answers. We have about 5.
5 or so.
Yep, about 5.
Okay, so it seems that in our group, finding meaning was the source of strength, the ability of Nelson Mandela to find meaning imprisoned, I think, for 20 years, if I remember correctly. I didn't look it up. Someone on this call can help me and tell me. To get through to the very end and to become a world statesman. Okay, let's look at the second picture. I'm sure you recognize it. It's the picture of U.S. Airways Flight 1549. And this picture was taken on January 15th, 2009, after Captain Sully, as he was called, actually, Sullenberger, landed the plane, if that's how you would say it, in the Hudson River after a flock of geese hit an engine and disabled the plane. So let's Let's see which you choose of the three elements as what was operative in that moment for this captain on January 15, 2009. One, see reality in a way that is actionable. I think this is a hard one to choose, and I'm going to ask you to force choice, only one.
All right, we're getting some answers, some hand raises. We have about 26 so far, 31.
So we say about 31.
30, yep.
31. How many see it as what was operative as finding meaning that got him through, and his crew and his passengers through this event to survive?
We have nobody yet.
Not,
2.
so this is what you call not so much.
6, 7. Very few.
Okay. And third, how many of you would say, if you had to choose, that this represents continually improvising, seeing the whole picture and making decisions?
49. 74. Getting up there. This might be the winner.
Yeah, it looks like it, huh?
82.
So 80 plus?
Yes.
Okay, 80 plus. So very interesting. So your consensus, as you apply these elements, these concepts, are that Nelson Mandela is an idea, well, thinking of him as an idea, that represents how one can find meaning in a situation and bring one through to an end, to become a statesman. And with Captain Sully and this event, it was, the operative element was the ability to improvise, see reality and improvise, constantly improvise. Oh, and thank you, someone told me that Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for 27 years, so I misspoke. Thank you. Little sidebar, I looked up the story of Captain Sully, and his first mate, just as a story, his first mate was asked what he would have done, or if he would have done anything differently. And his name was Skiles, First Officer Skiles. His reply was, the only thing I would have done differently is I would have done this in July, not January. Okay. Now, let's look at, we have three elements of resilience. Let's talk about how we practice this. And by the end of this, I'm going to ask you to practice it by writing something down as you anticipate an event coming in your life. So first practice, if we say that the three elements of resilience, again, are see reality, find meaning, and continuously improvise. What I'm going to ask you to look at is this is a coaching model. And the coaching model asks you to go from what we call a core thought through your emotion to action. And actually what we'll do, as I'll explain in a second, is we'll go from the middle back to the core thought and then to the action. So here's how it works. When you see that headline, to strengthen resilience, managers need to shift from reflexive, cause-oriented thinking to active, response-oriented thinking, what that says is we move from, as is said below, how do we move from the why did this happen, which becomes personal, to me, and move to what am I to do right now to have impact on this situation. So the way we analyze it in coaching is we start with the emotion that we are experiencing. Emotional intelligence, for those of you who are familiar with it, the emotional intelligence model call this project, or call this moment, I should say, pardon me, self-awareness. So it's acknowledging what a person is feeling, what I am feeling, and the source of what I am feeling. So the idea is I start with my state of mind or emotion, and then I look to what causes it, which is a core thought, an interpretation of the event that's occurring. And my job is to move from the emotion to the core thought and then construct a core thought that is actionable, which I'll explain in a moment. So once again, we start with what am I feeling, which is self-awareness. Then we go and we analyze it. What is the cause of what I'm feeling? It's a core thought. And then what is the actionable outcome that I can apply by deciding on the proper core thought? Example, supposing what I'm feeling is helpless. Supposing then I look back and I say, okay, the reason I feel helpless is I'm thinking this event is bigger than I'll ever be, and I feel helpless. In fact, it even feels personal. Why did the world turn on me? The coaching model is to then analyze the core thought and change it, which we'll talk about, to something actionable. So let's say instead of, this is bigger than me, I feel helpless, what if I instead move to a different question or different core thought? This is big, what action can I take that will have some, even small, impact on what's occurring? So I've moved myself from response and helpless to action and what can I do? And notice under action, we move out of the present and into a future, a visualized future outcome. So let's try this. Let's actually look at this in a second way. Our project then is, how do I decide upon, and I use those words deliberately, the core thought that asks the questions and that changes my emotional disposition so that I can bounce back, respond, and go forward. And the answer is, I change the core thought by thinking about actionable, practical questions. So these are great examples, as you see from an HBR article called How to Bounce Back from Adversity. Notice the questions are very practical. The first question, what aspects of the situation can I influence? So it focuses right away not on the whole, but on an incremental change. What can I do now from this place and change some aspect of the outcome? A second question, what can I do positively to impact the situation? Once again, it's not only incremental, it's now directional. How do I look at this situation in a way that I can have a positive impact, no matter how small? Which goes to the third question, which addresses its incremental nature or its breadth in this case. What can I work on that will mitigate the downside even by 10%? Notice in this thinking, rather than saying it's too big, I can't do anything, it becomes, what can I do that even in a small way moves this in the direction I want to move and changes the outcome by 10%? Because if I start with 10% and then add 10% and then add 10%, I'm moving. And finally, duration. The idea of this is to create a vision that's attraction-focused, that pulls me towards it. What will it look like on the other side of this adversity? Viktor Frankl represented that or expressed that beautifully in his book. Nelson Mandela, you said, represented that in his finding of meaning in the 27 years of incarceration. He saw the other side of adversity. I want to pause for a moment because I want to just make sure this is coming through, that the idea of resilience is to own what we're feeling by going behind it to find the thought that generates what we're feeling, and then deciding upon the thought that will produce action, an actionable outcome, so that we can get to the principles of see reality in a way that is actionable, so that we can find the meaning of what occurred that gives us vision of a future, and on the other side, as was said, and so that we can continuously improvise, as you said, Captain Sully did so beautifully in his landing of a plane in the Hudson River. Okay. I'm going to ask us to try something, and then we can talk to each other and answer any questions. I'm going to ask you to look for opportunities in your everyday, right now world to practice resilience by converting a core thought that might impede resilience to one that produces resilience through an action-oriented forward response. We have a motto at Lake Forest, which is, we learn it today and we use it tomorrow. So I'm going to ask us to try it today, right now, and apply something to our actual world. There's a couple hundred people on this call, so we have a couple hundred opportunities to practice this and change something about our world and how we impact the world. These are little examples because I wanted to think in terms of small incremental events, the 10%, like my flight is delayed, and now what am I going to do? Or my response to a boss that dismissed an idea that I've thought about but dismissed it very quickly. Now what am I going to do? Or the computer is acting so slowly as if it's after me. Now what am I going to do? So what I'm going to ask you to do for just in a minute or two here is on a piece of paper, write down something that strikes you that you're thinking about. And then I'm going to ask you to, that's in your world, and then I'm going to ask you to write down an answer or a response that allows you to see reality, find meaning, and improvise, choosing whichever one is most operative. It doesn't have to be all three. All we care about is that you convert the event to something you're going to take action on and be resilient. And then, if you're willing, we'd love you to show us what issues you're addressing in the chat area. So I'm going to be quiet for a moment and let's see what you are thinking about. I think the real Natalie's about to speak.
So somebody asked if we can chat out or send out the chat, and yeah, that's not a problem. We will go ahead and send that out after the session along with the recording and a PDF of the slide deck.
Okay. And I'm going to comment while you're thinking. I'd like to comment about some of the things I'm reading from you. Someone wrote thought, emotion, and action. That is correct. And I know Natalie just responded to the question regarding chats. I'm going to treat this as a question, if I may, while you're thinking. When you can't control what's happening, challenge yourself to control the way you respond to what's happening. That is where your power is. This person precisely stated what Viktor Frankl expressed when he made that wonderful statement between stimulus and in response, there is a space, and that space is where our power to make a decision and choose is. Perfectly said, so thank you. Having the wherewithal to use setbacks and failure as steps for growth towards success. That represents finding meaning once again. How can I use what's occurred to serve me and to serve what I'm trying to accomplish? Here's a comment. This is something that needs to be practiced daily in all aspects of life, and so that your team will see how you react to everything in your day and model after your behavior. Beautifully said. And it is true, and I hope one of the things that comes from our lunch together is that people see this as practical and applicable and actionable, not some cosmic idea. It is a daily event. And resilience, once again, to go back to a core idea in the emotional intelligence model, it's like a muscle. Resilience strengthens with practice, and like all muscle strengthening, one starts with simple, repetitive exercises to build up to the ability to run a marathon or whatever. Okay, and I'm catching up with you. Oh, and somebody wrote down what we're going to see in our next slide. So I'll hold on to that. I'm going to read, if I may, a comment, so thank you for being generous and sharing this with us. I got called out for asking a controversial question in a meeting. I am going to spend more time thinking through my questions before asking. Address with my team the need to deal with trust issues. So the resilience component in this is, if I can go back to our model, it's seeing the whole picture, which is what I'm doing when I ask my team for input, find meaning in what occurred, which is trust, building on trust, and then finding an actionable forward outcome. See reality in a way that is actionable. Here's a wonderful quote. Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Very cute. I began to model the type of manager I would want to have and started building a relationship with my manager. One of the things you're pointing out to all of us is resilience is not, while it comes from and resides in the emotional realm, hence the emotional intelligence model, it's visible through the action realm. And this comment of taking positive action expresses that it's one's behaviors that people model themselves after. And then from those behaviors, they infer a person's state of mind. Once again, it's always nice to have inspirational quotes, and thank you for these. And a very famous quote for this was Gandhi's quote, "You must be the change you wish for in the world." I've been recently working on a large issue for a Canadian location. I'm being stretched and it's uncomfortable. When I consider this in another context, I realize my boss trusts that I can handle this and have resources. It's interesting and I'm up for the challenge. So notice the word stretched, which is like the word bounce back, which is like the word resilience, which was used earlier. Someone said resilience is like a rubber band. So resilience does improve, increase by being permitted to stretch and even be uncomfortable and be allowed to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, which goes back to finding meaning. And then from that meaning, continue to see the world as accurately as you can and continuously improvise with action. Here's another good one, and practical. A person commented that they were in a place where it was too noisy to hear the call and took advantage of a great headset and left the area so that they could continue to participate. That's like the comment about the sale, which we'll come to in a moment. It's seeing reality, and it's taking action in an actionable way, and it's improvising. Wonderful. And then, of course, not of course, but one person is speaking about the desire to pull back from blame. It's interesting, isn't it? Because blame is a means by which we become less resilient because we abdicate our responsibility for action. Blame means it's not my fault and I don't have to do anything. So it's very important to go behind that to a core thought, which may be, I can't do anything, and change that, make a decision about it by seeing reality in a way that is actionable, and even 10% actionable, incremental. Another comment about feedback and how to push oneself to take emotion out of the feedback to take action so that I can take action and fix the perception. Beautifully said again. Someday, if we ever talk again, one thing we can talk about is feedback and how to give feedback in a way that helps people take action rather than pull in their horns. What this person is commenting on is, once again, going to the resilience quotient. How do I take the emotion out of it, change the core thought, think of it in actionable terms, see reality, and make decisions and improvise, take actions that are experiments to change outcomes. It's perfect. Okie dokie. Natalie, I'm going to show one more slide. I know you have a couple things to cover, and it's something that somebody already said. So it's something you could say to yourself, but somebody said it even better. Putting your effort into controlling the sail and not the wind. A prior comment was just that. Let's see if I can find it again. And that is, rather than yell at the wind, so to speak, one controls the sail. When you can't change, here it is, when you can't change the direction of the wind, you need to adjust the sails. That's what our idea is in resilience, in this case in improvising. We change the sails to adjust to the reality of the wind. Okay, thank you all for being on this call.
So we're going to be sending out the deck, and there's a list of further readings and learnings. So you don't have to write them down right now. You will be getting a copy of them. Did anybody have any questions for Mike?
We take your chat as good questions.
Yes. I'll give you a minute. Okay, it looks like everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you.
It was a great session. Thanks, Mike. We hope you've gotten some good information. Today's program was part of the Leadership Learning webinar series delivered to you by Lake Forest Graduate School of Management. This program was made possible by our sponsor, the Trustmark Foundation. Again, our deepest thanks for their support. Looks like we do, I thought someone had a question. I'm sorry. It was just saying we have, it was a great presentation. So we do value your feedback. In the chat box, I'm going to put a link. If you could take a few minutes to complete that, we would appreciate it. By you giving your feedback, we're able to continuously improve our sessions and provide better and better sessions each month. In addition to the corporate learning and graduate degree programs, Lake Forest has recently launched a new leadership development program with Crain's Chicago Business. This 6-month program meets 1 full day a month at Crain's downtown office and will help mid to senior leaders develop the critical leadership skills for executive positions. You can learn more at our website. It's lfgsm.edu/Crain's. And again, this information will be included in the PowerPoint deck that you will receive. It looks like we do, before I sign off, Mike, we do have one question.
Okay.
How do we balance the resilience with complacency, adjusting sales versus addressing issues?
There's a good one. Balance is a good word, too. Resilience with complacency, adjusting sales versus addressing issues. I have a suggestion for the question, the person asked the question there, and it's how to think it through. Complacency isn't good. So, and complacency, of course, isn't good because it's another way of saying there's nothing I can do about it. So the core thought becomes I can't help. I'm helpless. So resilience is the antidote to such a state by going back to the core thought and once again focusing on what's actionable. Sometimes the issues are not able to be solved in any one view, and therefore one must have meaning, which comes to a kind of faith that even with small incremental change, that my 10% over many iterations with other people's 10% will change stuff. I actually like to think that on this call with 200 people, 200 resilient events will occur, and those will be witnessed by other people, and that will change how they respond. So I'm going to park my car in the idea that we focus through resilience on what we can impact and continue to believe that by doing so we will change even the long-range outcome.
Mike, it looks like we have one more question. Why has the world become so sensitive to critical feedback?
Wow. I don't know. How's that for an answer?
Being honest.
That's a big question. I don't know. But I see the point. The world has become a critical place, perhaps because it's easier to do so.
Looks like people are answering. Great response and the reminder of
the way they were nurtured. We're going to mind the wisdom on the call.
Yeah, with that, we'll go advance to our next slide. Somebody asked if there is an upcoming webinar. The next webinar is on Tuesday, December 13th from 12 to 1 o'clock Central Standard Time. The topic is leading virtual teams, and that will be presented by Corrine Miller, one of our business leader faculty. With that, we'd like to end the session and wish you a productive rest of your day. Thank you.